Hello, hello, and welcome to Conversations for Your Health. I'm your host, Tafika Kier, and I have got a great guest on today. Agape Garcia is the executive director of Confronting Domestic Violence Incorporated, and she has a story to share about domestic violence and the after effects. You know, we often hear stories about post-traumatic stress, but Agape is sharing a story about post-traumatic growth. Agape, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on and for sharing your story with us today. Can you share with us your personal story?
Wow, absolutely. The not funny, let me choose my words carefully here. The interesting part is that I felt like I experienced domestic violence for the first time, in my later 20s when I was 8 months pregnant and survived a double attempted homicide. However, through my journeys and better understanding what domestic violence is and the different forms it comes in, I realized that I've been a part of domestic violence almost all my life. When my mother was pregnant with me, she was in a violent relationship, and I feel as if I received some of that trauma even as an embryo. And when I was about 2 years old, or when I was in the 2.5, 3 year, whatever range, she left the relationship. It was me and my younger sister. And she left because it was too much for her to handle. But she didn't leave with us. She left us there. So as you can imagine, the environment she left from that we stayed in, obviously we were exposed to quite a bit. And it was shortly after she left that, my sister had passed away from cancer. And then I was really by myself. My mother had left, my sister had passed away, my father completely checked out. So what I was exposed to growing up based on, his environment, what I was dragged around to, and the neighborhood that I lived in, violence was everywhere. I didn't know that it was not normal. It seemed very normal to me, to include my teenage relationship when, it was physical. It was very physical. But to me, that was normal. You stand up for yourself. You don't let anybody disrespect you verbally, emotionally, physically. You fight back. You fight back where I'm from. That's what you do. So, otherwise what? You're a punk. And then it keeps on, you get more and more and more. So I grew up in that dysfunctional environment. So again, I just didn't see anything outside of the norm. Now, when I had my daughter, I then realized, oh my gosh, this is not it. I do not want to repeat any patterns that either one of my parents did. And I definitely do not want to expose my daughter to the environment that I had, nor that I was in at the moment. I already knew it wasn't the right place to raise a baby. And so I worked through a lot of that trauma of abandonment and neglect, which is also a form of abuse. Being neglected is a form of abuse. Being abandoned is a form of abuse. And I worked a lot through that during my childhood instinctively. And what I mean by that is I found ways to keep myself so mentally stimulated and occupied that I really didn't live this very depressed, semi-suicidal life, even during, my transition into puberty and teenage years where you're really confused and trying to figure stuff out. I did cry a lot because it was so quiet that it was loud. It was so lonely that you cannot even understand how lonely really is until you hear that ringing from how quiet it is, and I literally kept myself occupied. I went to I signed up for every after school activity. I delivered newspapers, mowed lawns, washed cars, pulled weeds, babysat. I mean, it was something that was naturally being done within myself. So I didn't know that those were coping skills.
Yeah.
I didn't know. And so I believe that we're not given more than we can handle, and our experiences prepare us for things later in life. And of course, you don't understand these things until it's later in life.
Yeah.
So when I experienced, that double attempted homicide, that was, my second pregnancy, and my second child was on the way. My daughter was already 8 by that time. And he was a very silent abuser.
Can
There
I
was
ask, I'm sorry, could you said the second attempt? Is that what you said? Or did you say double homicide?
It was a double attempted
Oh,
homicide.
okay. For some reason I heard second. Okay.
Oh
But
no, my
okay.
second child. Yeah, my second
Gotcha.
child
Okay. Gotcha.
was on the way. And you know, he was offered a position on the other side of the United States, and he asked if I, wanted to move with him. And of course, are you kidding? Listen, the success story of getting out of the hood is getting all the way out of the hood, not just to a suburb. so so yes, I was definitely, down to expanding my family in a nicer place, and doing things differently. And so, yeah, he went first and got settled, and I gave my notice. I made sure that my, daughter was not going to miss a beat of school. I waited for her spring vacation. I had to wait for mine as well, because I was in college going after my bachelor's degree after being a high school dropout, by the way. Okay, I went back for my GED after my daughter was born and continued with my education. So I was not expecting to, have a second attempt at family, and having another person in my life and stuff like that. It just, things happen that you're not expecting, or that you're not planning, more so planning. So while I was unpacking my belongings and putting stuff away in such excitement of nesting and getting ready for, my second child, I was already 8 months pregnant. I had been there for a month already. Our belongings didn't arrive until later. And I had spent my time, getting to know the neighborhood, making sure that the school was good, that we, knew each other's face by name, and got to know the doctors in the area. And that's the only time that I had, available to do. So when I was putting my belongings away, I had came across the belongings of another female. And my heart was pounding out of my chest. My eyes were popping out of my skull. I was like, what the heck? I'm trying to think, did he have family? Did he have friends? Did I miss something? And so I waited until my daughter went to sleep that night. I pretty much just went about my day, trying to kind of sort through my own thoughts and emotions before I confronted him. And when my daughter went to sleep, I said, we need to have a conversation. I was putting my belongings away when I came across remnants of another woman, and I need to know what this is about. I was immediately met with, or being accused of going through his stuff. And I was like, I'm not going through your stuff. I'm putting my belongings away. Before I was able to complete my repeated statement, he had already had me on the ground. Like, we were sitting on the couch. So he just kind of pushed me down to the ground, and he sat and straddled my pregnant belly. And with his left hand had his left hand around my throat, and his right hand closed fist punching me to the head over and over. I don't really remember the grappling so much. What I recall, like it was yesterday, was my daughter's voice. Mom, Mom. Never did I hear such a scared tone from my child. And when that voice rang into my ear, and by the time it hit my brain, my response was, that's my daughter. And it was like my feet slammed on the floor. My hips were thrusted towards the ceiling. He rolled over the top of me. I popped up on my feet. I ran around the couch. Right at that very second, she's taking her last step off that stair. I grabbed her hand, and we jetted out the door like that, barefoot,
Wow.
in pajamas, with nothing in our hands except for each other.
Wow. Now tell me this, had Had he shown any of these signs of this before, like any type of like thing that would have made you think that he was, I mean, that's harsh. It's like, I can't even put into words. Like,
Right, exactly. So me neither. And I am so embarrassed to be like, no, there was no signs. And the crazy part about it is that I purposefully, intentionally got into like a really huge argument prior to moving just to test those waters,
yeah.
I needed to know because we had got into arguments before, but it was nothing really extreme. And I needed to push it to the level that, I did because I needed to see for myself. And there was nothing. And that is what makes it so embarrassing, is because I felt that I knew enough based on my childhood, based on my teenage experience, based on, the little bit of adulthood that I had at that point. I had been around not just my own, but seen enough and had enough friends that dealt with it, and hearing enough in, my neighbors and the complex. And it was all around me all the time. I mean, gosh, I had to walk through metal detectors just to get into school. So
But tell me why embarrassed though? Why are you embarrassed by that?
because there was because there had to have been something that I missed. There had to have been something there. I believe that there was something that I missed, but I still, to this day, I call him the silent narcissist, because I knew the friends, I knew the family, I met the parents, I met the cousins, I met the siblings, I met the co-workers, I met like childhood friends, I met everything and everybody. I had a key to the house. I had like there was nothing really to like create the red flag, but he waited until I left my job. I left my family. I left my friends. I left my school. I left my
He
neighborhood. I
groomed
left.
you. So that and but when you're being groomed, that's what they do. There's no way to see the signs. So you can't take that part onto yourself. Like, you need to release that today, because
Okay.
there's nothing for you to be embarrassed about. Nothing. Like you said, you did what you that, like you said, it's a big move. You're a smart woman, so you tested out the waters beforehand because you knew you were leaving and going to a different place. Yeah, so you need to release that, let that go right now, because none of this is because you know what that does is that makes it partly your fault, and it's not your fault. None of it was your fault.
No, definitely not that, because I didn't see it coming. I had no idea. And you're right. That I was being groomed and I had no idea. I didn't know what narcissism was. And back then there was not what there is today to do like background checks and to see like who's saying what, or, like what type of signs or needed education about somebody. There was nothing out there back then.
Yeah.
So, that was another part of it. But honestly, like the embarrassment and the feeling of being ashamed after the fact, so much so that I didn't even call home. I didn't call my friends. I didn't call my family. I didn't call anybody. I was literally freaked out, completely devastated, had no idea, what was what, who was who. I was in a foreign place. I didn't even know the laws. I ended up calling the police when I ran out of the house. I knocked on a neighbor's door and I was like, please, I need to use your phone. This is like a 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and here I am, 8 months pregnant with a 8-year-old daughter. And, thank goodness she opened up the door. Her kids were still they were fighting to put their kids to sleep. So I was just like, please let my daughter play with your kids. I need to use your phone to call the police. And, the police came, they did their assessment, and the cop said to me, I couldn't even wrap my brain around the cop saying to me, like, the way that he hit you, the way that he pinned you down, the angle and where he was making contact is like premeditated. Like he knew what he was doing, because it was all here. It wasn't here. It was here. But all you needed to do was move. I had blood blisters, purple. Oh my gosh, you could tell. So I didn't even know if my unborn baby was okay. I didn't even know if I was going to be able to have the baby. I talk about being devastated to the point where your life flips upside down in 5 minutes. I couldn't go to work. I couldn't go back to work. I was like high risk. I can't take a train, a plane, drive back home. I'm like 1,000 miles away plus. And oh my gosh, I'm about to have my baby in like less than 45 days. My daughter's going to be out of school in like 30 of those days. And I don't have an income. What am I going to
So that upended your life. What did you do? Like, how did that impact your life, the next stage of your life? I mean, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it was not easy. I'm a fighter, and I believe that I'm a fighter because of the childhood I had with no parents, no siblings, and learning the streets, right? We don't learn at home, the streets will teach you. So I learned quite a bit. And I had to I didn't get sleep for probably 2 or 3 days straight. I stayed on the computer trying to figure out, is he going to get bailed out? How long does he stay? It was like prioritizing what you need to know first without being so distracted from your emotions and devastation. Because it's like, if you're sitting there crying, you're not being productive and figuring out what can you do, where can you go, what's available to you. And what I learned is that there's no such thing as a shelter at midnight. No such thing as a shelter at midnight. No such thing as a shelter, like really within 24 to 48 hours, if that. Like, you have to go through an intake process, you have to like qualify, you have to make sure that you have like all this documentation and paperwork in place. I mean, holy crap, it is ridiculous. And then standing in line for food stamps, like that is a process as well. You don't get food stamps in 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours. Sometimes you have to wait a week or two. They have to come and visit you where you're at. My phone was disconnected. They couldn't even get a hold of me. So I'm missing appointments. The fuel injector went out on my car. So now I don't even know the bus system. I'm like 8 months pregnant, 85 degrees out, walking like 5 miles to get to where I need to go to. I mean, like, oh my gosh. The 1-800 numbers, I feel like I'm ranting, but this is so true for people that have been there and done this and know what is going on. Because 1-800 numbers, I cannot tell you how many I called. And you know what they give me? Another 1-800 number. And then when I call that, they give me another 1-800 number. And I get like barely anywhere. So I figured out that I learned that he was not going to be bailed out, that he actually was going to stay in there until the court date, which I did go in and I testified. By this time, I was like due in 2 weeks, and I was as big as the courthouse. And I was on stage. Oh my gosh. I was first behind, the scenes talking to the district attorney about, what happened and how adamant I am with the zero tolerance of that type of behavior because of where I come from, et cetera, et cetera. When I was on the stand and they brought him in to the courthouse, and when we made eye contact, my shoulders and my voice, I shrunk like a punk. I was like, yes, he did that to me. I'm thinking to myself, snap out of it, get your shoulders back.
Tell me that, was it fear or was it, did you feel bad for him? Like what was that feeling that you were having in that moment?
It was all of my strength being stolen like this, because I didn't know this at the time. A lot of the work that I've done since then, I have learned that when somebody to that extent of, what's the right word? If somebody can basically jeopardize your life, your livelihood, and your children's life, they can take your life. They tried to take your life like this. That takes all of your strength and confidence away in a heartbeat. It's not so much that, oh my gosh, I'm afraid he's going to kill me again, or, oh my gosh, I feel so bad for you. Not that. It was like, holy crap, this guy almost killed me.
Yeah. It's like a psychological thing that's kind of like he had that power in that moment.
Bingo.
And yeah, so I get that. I totally get that.
And then for it to be your own child, like, I don't even know who you are. Forget about me. Forget about me. Your own child? Like, what? I don't even know who you are. You're a monster. So, you know, as adamant as I was about testifying, I shrunk like a punk. I tried to talk to myself. I tried talking myself out of it. I tried to project my voice like you hear me today. And, this is how I was before I saw him. But I strongly believe that, the court system, they should not do that. They should not allow the offender to come in when the victim is up there testifying, because it really does take away their confidence and their voice. And that's a lot. Anyways, I was very resourceful. I didn't know, again, what the laws were in the new state. I just knew that I had
but what was the outcome of the when you were in court?
Okay, so the judge was like, "Oh, I've seen this a million times." So I laugh about it, but that's not funny, because if the judge has seen that a million times, then obviously they're seeing that this does take away from the victim and that they should not be doing that. However, that's another story and for another time. But he was convicted. He was convicted for 2 years. 2 years. 2 years for a double attempted homicide. I was like, okay, that is not a lot. Now my clock is really ticking. I was worried about, the 45 days, but now it's like, holy crap, now I only have like 2 years after that, if that, because more than likely you're going to get out on, good behavior.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So, while he's not worrying about the lights, the gas, or food or anything of that sort, here I am, like I said, in line for food stamps, trying to see how I can get any sort of assistance just to get my, fuel injector fixed on my car so I can get to the hospital, or so I can get to the school, so I can get to these doctor's appointments. It was really, really survival, life, kind of death type of situation. I felt like any little thing could definitely harm my unborn child even more so, because I was considered high risk after that situation. So what I ended up doing was repacking everything that I could. Whatever I could carry, I carried it to a storage facility. Whatever I couldn't carry, I just left it or sold it, did whatever I could. I did not know the laws, but I knew that a closed mouth does not get fed. So I was knocking on every door that I possibly could while I'm trying to call 1-800 numbers. And I'm like, listen, this is what's going on. I have a restraining order. Can you take my name off the lease? I need my name off the lease. I will get out. You don't have to evict me. I just need to get my name off of it, because I don't know what's going to happen. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, I ended up having the baby and staying there for about 45 days, and ended up finding a room, just a room in a home, to rent out for all three of us, so that I could figure my life out. I didn't want to stay in that space. I barricaded the door every single night. I made it fun for my daughter, saying like, oh yeah, we're just making sure that we're like extra locked up. And I even had like an escape route and plan for her, and she was a trooper, man. She was like, okay, mom, like whatever. And it was so much. I cried so much throughout all of it, but it was like I didn't have time to really cry to the point where I was working through what I was crying about. I was just crying because it was so overwhelming and so draining and so devastating. And I quickly realized that trying to figure out why somebody else did what they did, that is where you can really allow yourself to be consumed and go into a dark, dark space. And if you don't know how to intercept that part of you, you will need to find a lot of professional help beyond yourself or a coach. And I'll tell you, I didn't even know what mirror work was. And another instinctive thing, I got in front of the mirror and I was like, we're going to get through this. Do not put your head down and cry and act like you are clueless or helpless, because you are not. You are not given more than you can endure. Suck it up, figure it out. Your kids are depending on you. They're all you have. You already know you're not going home. What is it? Are you going to cry? Are you going to die? Are you going to live? Are you going to provide? Figure it out. The time is ticking.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of my previous guests, she has this saying that you basically did the same thing. You took your pain and made it into a purpose. So tell me about that transition. Like, so as you're working through all these things, like what was the thing that helped you to push forward and get to, I guess, the place you are today? And actually, tell me this: how long ago was that?
So that double attempted homicide was close to 20 years ago. And the way that I will say that I, coped with it to the best of my ability is called a double-edged sword. What I mean by that double-edged sword is that I stayed in a survival mode mindset. This is what has to happen. This is what needs to happen. We are this minute, every single minute on this clock is accounted for. I have to get up at 5. I'm making breakfast at, 5:15. I'm getting myself together. I'm making lunches. I'm putting dinner in the crock pot. I'm making sure you're at daycare. I'm making sure you're at school. I got to get to work. And then I got to get to it was every single flipping second accounted for. And oh my gosh, do not make me late, because then there's hell to pay, right? Because it's a domino effect. Everything is impacted by that. So it was like being the most responsible, the most like tightest ran ship imaginable. And that became an extreme independence driven type of survival mode mindset, which is actually a normal, natural, trauma-driven response. But if you don't know about it, you just keep going and going and going. And that's what I did, because I didn't know about it. I just felt like it was good and it was working, and that was great. And what I didn't realize is that I was completely ignoring all emotions, not just within myself, but also with my kids. Even though we laughed and played and had a good time, my daughter, when she left the nest, she said, "Mom, you were a helicopter mom. I could barely get away with anything. You were always right there. I appreciate you so much, but damn, you were emotionally unavailable." And I was like, what?
But you know what? But again, like you said, it's all things that make sense, because that was your coping method. Your coping method was to be the exact antithesis of everything that had happened to you. You're like, I'm going to be the opposite of that. I'm going to make sure that my kids don't ever experience that. I'm going to make sure that and you were focused on that. But that, you're a survivor. That's what that is. Man.
And it's like, sometimes when people say that, oh, you got to get out of that survival mindset, da, 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 da. And I'm like, maybe it's a negative for those that haven't had to do it, so they don't really understand, or they can't really connect with that, but for me in my life, what it has exposed in areas that I need to get better at, I appreciate it, because then that allows me to become a more rounded individual. And the survival mindset that I do have, that just means I put a lot of like logic and further thought into things, and I appreciate that. Like, it works well for me.
Mm-hmm. And tell me this: after the conversation you had with your daughter, did you try to find ways to get that part that she said we're missing?
Oh, heck yeah. We did the 5 love languages together. And then we did like a 3-day transformational seminar of where it's really all about emotional intelligence and breaking through, those emotional pains. I've never gone through so many Kleenex boxes in my life that I went through in that weekend. And then when I was like applying what we learned, she was like, "Stop being sarcastic. No, I don't think so. And I was like, okay, time out. Hold on. I know you're not used to this, because it's totally not who I am, but I'm making a very conscious, intentional, diligent effort here. So either you're going to accept this and accept it for its authentic, sincere, like desire to make, this happen, and for you to receive the emotional support and love that you want from me. Or I can go back to what I know best and we could just call this a wrap.
Oh, so you mean, so when you were actually being open and more, but you know what, how old was she at that point?
Oh no, she was in her 20s. So
Oh,
this
yeah.
was,
So,
she's
yeah.
mature. I mean,
But
she's
but you know,
mature.
but at the same time, that other person was all she knew. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so she thought I was being sarcastic, and
Yeah,
I was like, because I'm really
that
trying,
makes sense. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Now tell me this. So, I know in our previous conversation we had talked about you had mentioned, people don't really talk about the post-traumatic growth, right? But my question is, what part of your story would you say what was the part where you experienced the post-traumatic stress part, or did you just bypass that and go right to the growth?
Well, I would say that my post-traumatic stress era, couple of eras, was when I was just so independent, so extremely independent, where I was literally doing everything on my own and didn't let anybody in and kept such a tight-knit unit, so tight. That was definitely a post-traumatic stress response. And it lasted a long time. And I would have to say that, the PTG really truly kicked in right when my daughter said that, because it made me realize that as much as I was trying to prevent and mitigate everything that my parents did and everything that I went through as a child, uncontrollably, I created the same thing. My son, I was pregnant with him and I went through what I went through. So that's the same thing that my mother went through with me. And then my response to how I dealt with the situation, just being logical and not being in anybody's emotions. That was a huge eye opener to me, because it made me realize that not only did I do that because I was in survival mode, being protector and provider, but also I never got that growing up. So I didn't even know what the heck it was.
Yeah.
And I wanted to, at least out of everything and anything in the world, to have an emotional, healthy relationship with my children.
Yeah.
So that was like, okay, we're taking care of that real quick. Not real quick, but whatever it takes, we're taking care of that. That's priority. So as I went on in life, also, I endured a lot of surgeries from that night of saving our lives. Every body part that I used to fight him off, I had to be repaired. And so when you're in the bed and you're looking at the ceiling and you're feeling all of the emotions coming behind, knowing that what you're going through now on a surgery level is from that trauma, it really takes the healthy mindset and the positive intelligence to be able to intercept those doubts or that anger or that frustration or feeling that shame and things like that, so that you become a stronger, wiser individual from your trauma, and you level up your coping skills from that. When you can find what you're grateful for, when you can find what you learned from that situation, you can accept and feel better about it, because you know that something good came out of it and it lives within you. And you get to share it with others, and you get to give the best version of yourself. You get to live with the best version of yourself and share it with the ones that you love. I define post-traumatic growth as identifying how you are a wiser, stronger individual from the trauma you endured and what you're doing with it internally and outwardly. That is post-traumatic growth, where you're leveling up your coping skills and you're not in this. I don't like PTSD because post-traumatic stress is what it is. I don't think it's a disorder. how is it a disorder? I don't understand that
You
concept.
know what? I can understand how it could be interpreted as a disorder, and I'm going to tell you why. I had a client who had been through a lot of traumas as well, and she constantly was said, I have PTSD and all these other labels that she put on herself. And that was what she became. You know what I
Ah,
mean? So it became like, so she was like, no matter, even like when I would see her post stuff, it was, I have PTSD. I'm a PTSD survivor. I'm a PTSD. It was like, that became her identity. And the reason that I know that that's the case is because we started working together and she started to get better. And as soon as she started to feel better, all of a sudden, I can't do this right now. I have to quit. Because I believe because on a subconscious level, she was losing that identity and she didn't know who she was going to become. So I think that's how it can become a disorder, when you allow it to take over. Whereas with you, you used it to fuel yourself, to grow from it, to become better for it, where some people just sit in it. I think that's where because I mean, if you think about it, that's what a disorder is, when you're stuck in something and you're not able to work your way out of it. It's because it becomes like a illness, a process. So I think that's how it may be interpreted as a disorder, at least from my standpoint. And I had never even thought of it that way until I had that experience with that client, because I was like, but you're doing so well. Like, why would you quit now? It's like you said you haven't like, it's like one day it's like, oh my God, I feel better than I have in years. I haven't been in pain in 2 days. And literally within 2 days, I can't do this no more. It was so strange. And not, of course, I would never say her name or share any of that. But and I just so wish that she would come back, because she was doing so well, and I think it would be amazing for her to get out of that struggle. You know what I mean? Because like look, you're thriving. You have this, nonprofit that you're doing and all that, and and even with that, I would love for you to share about your commitment and your new mission with your company, Confronting Domestic Violence Incorporated. Can you share about that?
oh my gosh, absolutely. If I may, I want to say that I am this week going for my second level certification through Brenda Bouchard as a high performance coach.
Next.
So I have my coaching business too. It's called Be Your Incredible Self, because I do believe that through the post-traumatic growth and the stuff that we go through, at the end of the day, we do want to be our incredible self.
Mhm.
So I have that. And then the nonprofit, wow, the nonprofit is Confronting Domestic Violence. Confronting domestic violence. People feel that the word confronting is negative. However, you cannot conquer what you will not confront. Okay. And, confronting just means you care enough that you want to seek a solution, a remedy, some sort of resolution here. So our mission is to help real-time survivors with real-time resources, helping them and their children relocate to a safe place when they have one to go to, but not the means to get there. So since COVID-19, domestic violence has gone up immensely.
Yeah.
Since COVID-19, resources that were funding organizations like mine have gone scarce because everything's going to COVID-19. We're still dealing with the ripple effect from that. And there has not been a lot of talk or statistics or even just general information being shared enough out there to let people know how much domestic violence has risen. And that is why, as a survivor of a double attempted homicide, thousands of miles away from home, I want to give back. I know what that struggle is. I know how that feels. I know what being like naked and afraid really is when you're, in a situation like that. And I know that this can truly help families, giving children a second chance at having a safe childhood and a promising future.
Nice. Yeah, that is beautiful. Yeah, I know when we spoke originally, we had talked about the fact that my mom was actually a domestic violence survivor, but she did like you, she took her pain and made it into purpose. And then she became a counselor and advocate for domestic violence and for battered women and children in general. In fact, back in the early 70s, which is when my mom had really been doing a lot of this work, as you know from what your background and your study is, there weren't any laws back then. Like I don't think even laws even got passed until like the 90s, like early 90s. But back then women were considered their husband's property. Even like when you're not married, and what's it called? When they
Common law marriage.
Common law marriage, like they would be like, oh, you're in a common law marriage, and the guys could just keep. So my home, actually, when I was a toddler and younger, my mom, our home was a safe house for battered women and children. They lived with us. I have so many extended brothers and sisters that lived with us, even like gay kids whose family kicked them out, they lived with us, so I know the impact that what you're doing has on helping people, because I saw it firsthand with my mom, and so many people I know that over the years, even to this day, people send me messages if I post a picture of her and like, she saved my life, that kind of stuff. And this work really does save people's lives. So for anyone that is interested in supporting your cause, whether it be, volunteering, giving things, maybe it's giving clothes or toys for the kids or whatever of these parents, or of course, which we all know is much needed, is the funds. If they can help you with that, how can they get in contact with you to help support this cause?
Oh my gosh, we just launched our website in October, which is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and that is confrontingdv.org. confrontingdv.org or confrontingdomesticviolence.org. Either one of those two will take you to the same spot.
Very, very good. Thank you so much. Now, before I let you go, first and foremost, I want to thank you, first of all, for being so open and for sharing your story and your truth with all of us. And I'm sure, like, even though you've recanted this, I'm sure 1,000 times, I'm sure it still, hits you in the heart every time, because it takes you back to that place. So I really, truly do appreciate you sharing your story with all of us. And just finally, is there any final words you'd like to share with those of us who are still on and watching?
Sure. Yes, I have a wounds to wisdom statement. And that is, you do not need to suffer. You definitely don't need to suffer alone. There are resources out there. And unlike back in the day, today, there's so many people that are willing to help, that want to help. And you'd be surprised how many of us have been through some stuff and are willing to just really give and share, support, provide, and help however we can. Nobody should suffer alone.
That's absolutely not. And thank you so much for the work that you're doing with your company, Confronting Domestic Violence Incorporated. And for everyone watching, again, if you want to show any type of support, whether it's volunteering, money, donations, whatever, you can get in contact with Agape and Confronting Domestic Violence Incorporated. You can scan the QR code on the screen to get directly to her website. So again, Agape, thank you so much for being here, and thank you all for watching. Until next time, please be safe and be well.